So, when I say the word megalith, what pops into your head? Chances are it's Stonehenge, right? You know, these huge stones put up by some mysterious ancient people, a story that's basically lost to time. But what if that story wasn't just ancient history? What if in one part of the world, that tradition, well, what if it never really died? That's what we're going to dig into today.
Yeah, just think about that for a second. What if the folks who built Stonehenge just kept on building for thousands and thousands of years, right into recent history? Well, that's pretty much the story we're going to explore in Ethiopia, a place that is absolutely packed with one of the biggest concentrations of megalithic structures on the entire planet.
And this is the kicker, right here. This isn't just some theory. We know for a fact that in Ethiopia, putting up these huge stones is a tradition that has spanned millennia. It makes the country this totally unique window into why we humans have always felt this need to make our mark on the world.
Okay, so take a look at this map. It really shows you just how complex this whole thing is. We're not talking about just one tradition here. Nope, we're looking at least three totally different, mostly independent worlds of stone monuments. So to really wrap our heads around it, let's go on a little journey across this amazing landscape. We're going to hit the north, the east, and the south.
All right, first stop, the north. This is the home of the Aksumite kingdom, and its, world-famous monumental obelisks. This is where the ambition to build with stone literally reached for the sky.
And you can totally see how their ambition just grew over time. The early stuff, the first funerary monuments, they were simpler, smaller stones. But then you get to the 3rd and 4th centuries CE, and wow, the kings of Aksum were just on another level. They started putting up these colossal stone towers, these stelae, to mark these incredibly elaborate underground tombs.
And you've got to look at the details here. These were not just blank slabs of rock. No way. They were absolute masterpieces, carved from a single piece of stone to look like multi-story buildings. They've got fake doors, fake windows. They even carved the ends of wooden support beams sticking out. They call those monkey heads. It was basically their way of building a permanent, indestructible palace for the afterlife.
But that leads to the big question, right? How on earth did they pull this off? Well, this image here shows you the very first step. These monster blocks of stone were cut right out of quarries, just like this one, about 4 kilometers from the city. Just quarrying and then moving these things, that alone was an epic feat of engineering.
And when I say epic, I really mean it. The biggest one of them all, a monster called Stela 1, weighed in at 520 tons. Let that sink in. 520 tons. To give you some perspective, that's heavier than a fully loaded Boeing 747 jumbo jet. An unbelievable weight, moved and carved entirely by human power. Just wow.
Okay, so how do you get something that heavy standing upright? Well, based on what archaeologists have found, this is probably how they did it. First, they'd move the stela on rollers up a specially built ramp. Then, at the very end of the ramp, they'd have this deep, stone-lined pit ready to go. The next part is genius. They'd tip the massive stone forward, letting its own immense weight do most of the work as it slid into the socket. Then, it was all about using ropes to pull it the rest of the way up, and finally packing the base with stones to make sure it was secure. So clever.
But this incredible tradition, it didn't last forever. It looks like that biggest stela, that 520-ton behemoth we were just talking about, actually fell and shattered while they were trying to raise it. A massive failure. And this disaster happened right around the same time as a huge cultural shift. The Aksumite kingdom converted to Christianity in the 4th century. After that, churches, not giant obelisks, started marking royal tombs. And just like that, the age of the stone towers was over.
All right, let's shift gears. For our next stop, we're jumping over to the east, near the city of Harar. And here, we find a completely different and much, much older megalithic tradition.
So in this region, we're not talking about those towering stelae anymore. We're talking about something called a dolmen. And you can kind of think of them like ancient stone tables. They're basically tombs, built with 2 or more upright stones holding up a massive flat capstone on top, which creates a little chamber underneath. And the timeline here is just mind-blowing. The earliest dolmens go all the way back to the 2nd millennium BC. Okay, let's be clear. That means people in this area were building massive stone tombs over 1,000 years before anyone in Aksum even dreamed of building those giant stelae. And then, and this part's crazy, after a gap of more than 1,000 years, the practice came back. It was revived in the Middle Ages with new styles of tombs. It's an amazing story of a tradition that just refused to die out completely.
Okay, time for our final stop. We're heading south now to the Gadio and Sidama zones. And if Aksum was all about that sky-high ambition and Harar was about those super ancient tombs, well, the south is all about insane numbers and totally different shapes.
I mean, this picture says it all, doesn't it? On the left, you've got that sharp, towering architectural style from Aksum. And on the right, the southern stelae are just completely different. They're more organic, rounded. A lot of them are phallic in shape. We're looking at a completely distinct artistic and cultural world here.
And the scale here, it's almost impossible to wrap your brain around. Archaeologists have found more than 10,000 of these stelae in this region alone. 10,000. It's the highest concentration of megaliths in the whole country. It really is like walking through a forest made of stone.
So what does this all mean? Well, for starters, we're seeing a continuous tradition that stretched from the 1st century all the way up to the 19th century. That's almost 2,000 years of unbroken tradition. And unlike the huge royal monuments up in Aksum, these seem a lot more community-focused. They feel like they're tied to ongoing rituals where families just kept adding new stones over the generations. And some of them even have faces carved on them, which suggests a really different, maybe more personal connection to their ancestors.
So let's pull back to that map one last time, just to bring it all home. We've just traveled through 3 incredible and totally distinct megalithic worlds, all inside one country. Up north, we had the skyscrapers of the Axumite kings. Over in the east, the ancient tombs, the dolmens. And down south, that dense, ritual forest of stones, built continuously for nearly 2,000 years.
So I guess the big takeaway is this. Ethiopia doesn't have one megalithic story. It has this incredibly rich, complex tapestry woven from many stories. It proves that this fundamental human need to mark the landscape with huge stones wasn't just some one-off thing that happened in prehistory. It was a diverse, powerful, and enduring tradition that took on all sorts of different forms for all sorts of different reasons.
You know, these stones, they're like silent witnesses. They stood there through thousands of years of our history. They've watched kingdoms rise and fall, beliefs come and go, countless generations pass by. And it really makes you wonder, doesn't it? If those stones could actually talk, what other stories are they still keeping for us?